Good morning. How's your weekend been? Alright, just taking a look over some initial positions really quick. You won't be able to see it on screen, I have it pulled up on my phone. Good morning, everybody. So give me just a couple minutes before we really get started because I'm currently updating the the list. So just give me one moment. I didn't really have a lot of time this weekend. Good morning, everybody. We're gonna jump into looking at SPY here in just a couple minutes. So we do have a little bit of data this morning, which I'll take a look over in just a couple minutes here. I do think it comes out at 9:30 or 10. Let me check my notes really quick. See, ISM non-manufacturing data comes out at 10 a.m. Yeah, so we'll have to worry about that in 30 minutes. Shouldn't really move the market much though. Okay, I'll have to update the rest of the positions in a little bit. Okay, let me pay attention to what's going on now. Good morning, everybody. Who's ready to get some good trades in? Let's see. So that's hourly. Just want to look at the hourly on QQQ really quick. So QQQ still respecting its selling channel. Still have not closed this cup here either. So we will just keep that highlighted. Now on semis, we closed a very large inverse cup, and because of that, this can be that handle before pulling down even further. Stupid Weeple sometimes. And then there's the bullish structure, which can be leading into an additional handle to the downside. So something we need to be aware of. Now SPY on the 5-minute time frame. Actually, I want to go up to this one, or the 751.31, because that is the top resistance there. So this looks like a little bit of a failed structure, because we again have not closed that cup there. Which potentially can make this a little bit of a head and shoulders. Doesn't look exactly correct because it's slanted, but this can be the liquidity for that. So we'll see if that curves down or not. But I want to see the HIG, I want to see the volatility with the actual open values. We have semis pushed up pretty massively right now, so that can continue upward. But I think the real expectation would be for it to pull back a little bit. We have additional cup to close here, which has not closed. So we'll be kind of looking for that for the bullish upside. Or else we might be selling off again. Kind of the same thing happening with semiconductors, QQQ, and the SPY. It's kind of the expectations I'm expecting is that I expect a lot of this to kind of sell off today. But I'm not really bias leaning one way or another. If we end up seeing buying, then we'll get into that. If we end up seeing selling, we will jump into that. Market opens in 40 seconds. Alright, market open. Let's turn the Bollingers back on. So we are pushed above the upper Bollinger right now, which can create a really nice short position. I want to see if it kind of fails closing this 749.52. The HIG is at 79.77. Volatility is currently at 91.55. So this is kind of tricky because we can pull up very quickly and close this cup, which would be bullish if I could draw it correctly. Sorry, my mouse is dragging sometimes. So this can close very quickly to the upside and create a bullish structure. However, a rejection from here creates a very bearish structure. So while there was a put opportunity there, I didn't take it. Just because we could potentially close that cup. Volatility definitely is elevated right now. Semi selling off pretty hard. They were all the way up to, well, I guess the high of the day was 584.72. So really not that bad. But semis basically are at their lower Bollinger, which means that they can be pushing upward. Same with QQQ here. So I think this could be a little misleading on SPY. I feel like this could push SPY up quite a bit. The ADL is rising, which I don't care too much about just yet. We are seeing volatility rise as well. There has been a pretty heavy consolidation this morning, meaning that the Bollinger Bands have been pulling together very tightly, which means that we should be expecting a pretty large move, either to the upside or downside. I know that doesn't really tell very much just yet, but when they're heavily consolidated, usually that's when you get a very large move from those consolidations. Kind of like in this range, they pull together, have a very large buy upward, pulls back down, pulls together. We'll see which way we start heading. And I keep yawning, I apologize. One thing I don't like seeing though is, again, I don't like seeing the SPY in the upper Bollinger while semis and QQQ are telling us that, you know, they're in the lower Bollinger, they're ready to push to the upside, while SPY is showing us kind of the opposite story. Which is making me think that very likely it's the SPY that's going to end up getting pushed to the upside. So we're just gonna watch this for a little bit here. Now we did close an inverse cup here on semis, which means that this can be forming a handle to the downside. Volatility is pulling down slightly, so it was at 91.70. It's at 91.34 currently, which is supporting, the SPY ending up pumping. HIG did open towards the 79.80. It's currently at 79.77. Now, the big reason why my portfolio value is going down right now is because of ACN. I'm not really worried about that right now. And again, I don't want to be forcing any day trades in here. I only want to take them if it makes sense. So as long as we're seeing kind of that divergence between SPY, QQQ, and semis, then just going to be really patient. Volatility did drop to the 91.36, currently at 91.45. We see SPY closing a small inverse cup. This has plenty of room down right now, so I'm just going to be very patient. QQQ also closed that inverse cup here. Volatility still at the 91.44. Still seeing volatility pull back a little bit. So remember, we do have some data coming out in 18 minutes. I don't really expect it to do much. Good morning, Wonders. Yes, I am feeling a lot better. I'm just kind of tired because I had a long weekend. Now, semis did push upward and invalidated the inverse cup here. So I kind of am expecting this push all the way to the 595. That would close that smaller cup. QQQ just about invalidated their inverse cup here. I mean, only a penny off. 2 cents off, basically. And volatility still pulling down, so it's at 91.22 currently. Seeing buying on the HIG, currently at 79.79. ADL's looking good. Now that we actually have a little bit of candles in here on the 5-minute time frame, we can somewhat start to trust the ADL. Now, I might take a quick position just to close that 749.47 range. If I can find my SPY on my phone. Might be too late. Yeah, it's already too late for. Maybe not. There's room in these 750s. So I want to look at the 1 minute time frame here really quick. Volatility pulled down. Hig pulled upward. Okay, I'm going to take these two 750s and ride them up to the 749.47. So I'm going to set my market conditional order to 749.39. Of course, second I buy the calls, they decide to drop. But it is okay. Volatility still pulling down. Seeing continued buying on semis. Should give us that bounce all the way to the 749. Volatility still pulling down. It's at the 90.88. Seeing some buying in semis, so should be good. Volatility still pulling down, so at the 90.84. Just waiting for this little push here. Now we can be pushing all the way to the 750, 751 here. So I'm going to try to only sell 2 of the contracts and keep the additional. See if we can potentially run all the way to that range. Okay, those contracts sold. Secured initial profit. So if we do start rejecting here, I will cut this call just because there is a closed cup. Should lead into a handle pushing towards the upside. But I just want to be very cautious today because we do have some important data coming out in 8 minutes. Yep, I'm going to go ahead and just toss that position. Not going to worry about it. So, tiny scalp there. We see semis getting ready to close this larger cup. QQQ has a cup here. It's at the 723.83. Oh, secure that level. So I'm glad I sold those positions because that smaller cup did play out. Starting to build a handle. Now this handle can lead to a pretty large breakout, but we do have that data coming out in a few minutes, so I'm just going to be patient. It's the non-manufacturing ISM data, which does have a labor market portion to it, which definitely can affect the market. Good morning, Jin. So we took a super small scalp, but I'm waiting for kind of the big move to start making sense here. We did close this inverse cup, or not inverse cup, but bullish cup here. Then we have that smaller cup forming, so this can lead to a pretty nice breakout. This is the symbol I need to turn around a little bit so that I'm not down so much on the day. Which potentially is starting to form a head and shoulders, which I don't want to see. Look at the daily time frame here really quick. Looks like it's priming for a 5-mile retest either today or tomorrow. So this little cup here can be misleading just because we do have this larger cup on SPY. So while this little cup expects a handle, so does the larger cup, which means that we basically can pull down all the way a little above this 746 range, and this can still be a bullish structure. So definitely a little misleading. But I think overall we should be looking upward on the day. Even if we do have semis pushed almost 5%, tech pushed, 1.5%, I do think there's still room to the upside. But inversely, this can turn into a double top and pulls down pretty massively on the day. So, not out of the woods just yet, but really not clear enough to jump into any one side or the other. The scalp I took earlier was just super, super small because I wanted to see the closing of this smaller cup. It closed pretty much out of all those positions. Well, not pretty much, I am out of all those positions. So we have data in 2 minutes here. Not really any great trades to take so far today. I mean, there's some, but don't want to just randomly jump into positions. And currently the Bollinger Bands are so tightly consolidated that it's really hard to take a mean reversion type trade within the upper Bollinger or the lower Bollinger, meaning, puts it the upper Bollinger, calls it the lower Bollinger, expecting a reversal. Our levels are just so close right now that we don't really have the expansion that we're looking for. We're starting to see it on semiconductors where it's starting to open up a little bit. And semis, we'll call that a closed cup. It's only 12 cents off. So they did close that cup. QQQ definitely closed it. Yeah, today's kind of a hard day because we can really go either direction. We can either push towards this 751 or we can absolutely dump towards this 740. Volatility is still elevated. Even though it's been pulling down, it's still at that 91. Well, currently 90, 97, but essentially same thing. Okay, let's check the data. Alright, so the non-manufacturing prices came in slightly elevated. The non-manufacturing PMI pulled down, and the non-manufacturing employment rose a little bit, which I do think is misleading because based off of the participation rate, we actually lost quite a significant amount of jobs um, in the last cycle. So volatility still pulling down a little bit, but we also see the HIG pulling down as well. So I'm not very keen on this bullishness just yet. And again, the hotter data or the hotter employment aspect of this data could be used as a bearish catalyst on the day. Because hotter employment, hotter labor data usually leads to rate hikes rather than rate cuts. Rate hikes being the, bearish side of the Fed, which I do think rate cuts can be bearish as well. See the 1 minute time frame on semis. This potentially can be forming a small head and shoulders. But equally, it could also be forming, a smaller cup here as well. So we'll see if this pulls upward or starts pulling downward and giving us a rejection. We do have the cup closed. This can be forming that handle to the upside. But equally, this can be creating that head and shoulders as well. Volatility almost at the low of the day. HIG currently at the 79.78. There's also that head and shoulders on QQQ. Smaller cup has been invalidated. Well, I guess not fully. Needs to pull down to the 747.41. Which it looks like it's going to do. Now the problem with that is that technically we still have this larger cup closed, which is what I was saying earlier, is that we can potentially pull down all the way to the 747 range, and this would still be a bullish structure. Now, if semis do close this 594.88, then that would be bullish. What positions do you have going right now, Jin? Seeing bullishness out of semis. Now there's room to potentially take calls at this middle Bollinger, or 20 but I just don't feel really great about it right now, so I'm not going to. But there is room to go from the lower Bollinger back up to the high of the day. And structurally it looks fairly okay so far. Again, we do have the smaller cup, potentially creating the handle, leading to the breakout. We have semis pushing that range that they needed to push, which, because they're the top of a cup, we need to mark that. Potentially we can start seeing bearish structure. So we will be looking for that, and the reason why we expect bearish structure again at the top of this cup is because we expect to form a handle to the downside. From that downside handle, grab bullish liquidity and head upward. So seeing that makes me really want to short the SPY here, but the opportunity hasn't really opened yet. QQQ has closed a smaller cup and larger cup as well. It already kind of closed that larger cup. But with this smaller cup closing, this can turn into liquidity to the upside, can pull down, form a handle, then continue upward. Volatility is pulling down still, so it's at 90.58. This is a symbol pulling me down quite a bit right now. I need this one to start heading upward. I mean, the upside breakout looks good. I'm not seeing, well, it's not that I'm not seeing, it's just the opportunity doesn't look super good right now. Mainly because the market's already pushed up very, heavily. Can the SPY, you know, push up to that 751? Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely go up, another 25 or 0.25, 0.30%. Um, but what's that going to do to semis and QQQ, who have closed these larger cups? Well, both of these symbols are telling us that very likely they're going to start pulling down fairly soon here. Now, a $30 move out of semiconductors is something we've definitely seen happen multiple times before. However, the range from here is kind of pulling back up to that 614.40. Are we going to pull up, essentially a whole nother $20 today? I don't know about that. That'd be a little extreme. We did see that negative 8% day. I believe it was on Thursday if I remember correctly, which can lead to an 8% upside day as well, especially if we're just filling that gap. But nothing I feel super comfortable about taking a position in just yet, unfortunately. Because the way I see is that tech and semis are telling us that, yeah, potentially we can pull down, start forming this handle, and then head upward. Which for SPY, that would, definitely pull the SPY down as well. And we see that on both semis and tech. So I don't want to force any positions in here today. If I start seeing some better signals, then I'll engage on something. But so far, other than that earlier quick day trade we did, I'm not willing to jump into this just yet. My ACN positions, it's some random company out of Ireland, but the reason why I jumped into this one very heavily is because it pulled down, well, it did have a single day where it dropped from this 164, 165 range all the way down to the 128, and then the next day it jumped down to the 118. I'm wanting to basically see this gap filled. So I have many 130 call positions and 150 call positions to do that. So those should hit towards in the money. I'd be very surprised if it didn't. That handle is looking very good on the SPY. So congratulations whoever took those calls. I just didn't feel comfortable doing so. So basically in this range, I'm starting to look for bearish structure on QQQ and semis. They've both completed their cups here and having a little bit of an extension from that. So I am looking for bearish structure at this point. Looking for bearish structure, but overall we are in bullish structures, so a little confusing. And it's also my USO position. Um, we're kind of in this position right now where it says the puts are down $76. That's on the day though, not overall. Um, but because we're having a little bit of upside, meaning literally like 70 cents of upside, um, they're deciding to really gut the puts currently. So my puts were up basically 300 something, and currently they're up 94, so we should expect this smaller cup to close. Well, this nested cup, handle, whatever you want to call it. But we should expect that push to the 749.54, very likely pushing above it. Semis have not started any bearish structure just yet. Excuse me. Same with QQQ. Starting to see a little bit of selling, but we want to see some actual structure forming. Now, volatility is still elevated, even though it has been pulling down from this morning. It's still at the 90.53. Now, a rejection from here would be pretty bearish because one, it hasn't closed this cup yet, which might seem like it's very close, but when we're on the 1 minute time frame, this does kind of matter quite a bit. So if we do see the rejection from there, this can turn into a bearish structure. Doesn't look likely it's going to, but we did see that pretty large selling candle. On the 5 minute time frame, it's showing as a buying candle. We're seeing semis starting to sell a little bit. Potentially starting to form this head and shoulders. So we'll see if we get continuation within that. Kind of same thing here on QQQ. So that this can start to form a head and shoulders here. Okay, we did get that push. It closed that gap that I talked about, which is actually really important. Basically, at this point, we're just waiting for semiconductors and tech to taper out or continue pushing. Either way, I don't really care. They need to do something. We still have the HIG at 79.79. Volatility is still sitting at that 90.52, which is telling me that dealers are hedged a little bit. Volatility ticked down quite a bit. It's at 90.24. So if we continue seeing volatility pulling downward, then we should be seeing this closing this range all the way to the 751.31. But I'm just very hesitant on that right now because, again, on semis and tech, we've basically have the exact same structure, which we have a little bit on SPY. Now that we did close that cup, we can potentially pull down quite a bit before pushing to the upside. So I am looking for those handles to the downside before taking call positions today because the market is very extended this morning. Again, semis are up over 5%. Tech is over, or is up over 1.5%. SPY over 0.50%. So we do have some room potentially to the downside before fully heading up. Now, they might just take the levels anyway, and if that's the case, then that's the case. Not too worried one way or another. But I don't want to be forcing trades in here. Especially when semis can be pulling down very heavily soon, potentially forming a small inverse cup and handle. QQQ, somewhat of the same structure building. So really not too excited about what we're seeing here until I see a major pull to the downside to form that bullish liquidity to head upward. Now I kind of do want to short the top of this. So let's look at the 747 puts. I think those are cheap enough. And I think those are actually very likely to hit. So we're going to go ahead and take a short position. Right in there. Now again, I took the 747 puts. They're super cheap right now. But if we're going to get that handle to the downside, we should be expecting quite a bit of selling here. And we do have a lot of room to sell as well. Again, the market is, I don't want to say super overextended, but it's pushed up very heavily this morning, which means that we should have plenty of room to the downside. So those are the positions I like. Now we can take an initial exit at the 20 mo. Then additional exit at the lower Bollinger. And we did see volatility tick up very slightly. Now, I'll likely be holding these positions for a while unless we get our move down fairly soon. But it does look like SPY wants to push a little bit here prior to this. Now these positions were fairly cheap, so I'm okay with holding them for quite a while. Not really too worried about the theta chewing them up too much. These are going to be much more delta driven than, you know, a contract that's close to in the money or at the money. In terms of the theta anyway. The inverse cup and handle did pull down. Can be aiming to build some more of that bearish structure. A little too soon to say yet. We are seeing volatility tick upward, so it's currently at 90.57. HIG has pulled down slightly, so it was at 79.80. It's currently at 79.78. So we're just waiting for the selling to pick up. Now again, there is the potential here where we push up all the way to the 751, 31. I don't think that'll happen prior to pulling down to form the handle, but the potential is definitely there. But the reason why I don't expect that is because that same range on semiconductors is, roughly a whole $20 above us. So I would expect some liquidity to the downside prior to that, especially when we have closed these cups. We are in the upper Bollinger as well on the 5-minute time frame. So kind of exactly the conditions I'm looking for to short into this. Just looking for continued signs of selling, so a increase in our volatility, decrease in our HIG. Now I want to put my first exit at the 748.09. I know that's below the middle Bollinger, but I am expecting this gap to be filled here, or to be taken anyway, to the downside. So going to place the first market conditional order at that range. So 748.09. Then the next one, I'll be looking for the 747. Probably hit that 746 range, but I'll just do the 747, 41 for that second order. So let's put it to 747.49. Volatility is at 90.49, so tick down slightly. And let's see the 1 minute structure. This can potentially pull up and form a cup. I don't really expect it to, but it can. Starting to see some selling in here, which can be that Head and Shoulders starting to build. Then build the right shoulder. Hig is also pulling down as well. Sorry if it sounds like I'm shivering. My house is super cold right now. Guess I can't complain though, because there's a lot of people in the world right now that are just absolutely melting. Yes, I'm still holding the Hims puts, even if Hims is not working in our favor right now. And we wait. Should be seeing this right shoulder build, so we can pull up all the way towards this, towards the 750 range again. We are starting to see some more of that bearish structure out of semis. So if we close down towards the 593.27, then that would be, further confirmation that our puts are going to do well. Now tech here did push up a little further, but I still think the conditions of a Head and Shoulders are very valid within that range. Yep, I'm currently in puts. I'm in the 747 puts. Really expecting to hit towards the 747 41, but I have my stop set for 748.09 and then also for 747.49. So I am expecting some large downside. Now, if you want to be really safe today, you can take an exit within the 20 MA, which is at the, yeah, we're on the 5 minute time frame. It's at the 748.79. Would not be a bad idea. But I do think we're going to try to push down a little further today. I think we're going to try to hit that gap right in there. And also potentially push down to the 747 range. Because we can push down throughout all this and the market would still be bullish. From that range, we can see some large buying to the upside. Basically the cup and handle. Always try to short the top of cups because the handle usually is going to pull down. seeing continuation within our structure. Hit the lower Bollinger on the 1 minute time frame, which means that we can start building this even larger head and shoulders now. So we're just going to be very patient with our puts. Let me go ahead and get these charts cleaned up just a little bit. So we're going to delete this because we already know about it. That's what we have that line up there for. So at this point, we're just looking for continuation within our structure. Even though overall we have a bullish structure, the handle should be pulling us down quite a bit today. It's okay, Jin. That's the thing is like we don't have to force trades every single day. It might seem like we do, but we don't. If we don't see the opportunities available, if the price action isn't working towards our favor, if you have other positions where you're not able to liquidate and enter other positions, then sometimes you just have to be patient. Volatility still needs to build a bit. It's currently at 90.47, so I do expect it to start climbing towards that 91 range when it's really time to go. I want to look at the 1 minute structure here. Now, potentially what we have to contend with is that this can turn into a bullish cup, which would kind of, absolutely destroy the puts. I don't really anticipate that to occur because we are already very close to our upper Bollinger. Basically pulled from that upper Bollinger. We have not hit the 20 MA. Technically, it doesn't need to. Technically, it can just push back up to the high, form an additional cup there, and then keep pushing. But that's not what I'm expecting. I'm expecting kind of this range to be taken out. In terms of the selling side, I won't keep that there, but that's just so that we can see. Because we do have this potential, head and shoulders building here. Currently just waiting for volatility to pick up. We are seeing additional selling from the HIG, so it's at 79.76. I'm glad they're helping. Yeah, I'm glad the classes are helping. I think there's 8 hours of footage right now, or fairly close to that. I want to look at the 1 minute time frame on semis. So this can potentially turn into a double bottom. Did not close that cup. With QQQ, we do see this head and shoulders kind of invalidated because there is this smaller cup closed and potentially working on a handle. So one bullish signal, potentially two bullish signals, if we see a continuation within the structure. But again, this can be a double bottom. And for SPY here, this can close this cup back up to the 750.17. Which at that point, that would invalidate some of this bearish structure we've been building. So we'll see if that occurs. Just gonna place that there for right now. On semis, potentially the smaller cups forming. Micron has a really nice cup and handle formed. So on the 1 minute time frame, we'll see if we get a rejection off this 20 MA or if we pull through it. If we can pull through it and close this range down to the 749.10, that'll be very, very important because this will form an inverse cup and handle. However, if we have a push back to the upside from this range, then that's likely telling us we're going to close that 750.17. The HIG is currently at 79.77. Volatility still has not been moving up on us. It's been basically holding this 90-40 range. It's currently at 90.42. is looking like a bounce off this range. Volatility has pulled down to the 90.36 as well. I'm not engaged in calls right now, but the upside is looking very good if we don't get this downside invalidation fairly soon. But we are starting to see semis sell a little bit. I'm gonna look at QQQ here a second. So if QQQ pulls to the 723.54, then that will invalidate some of this bullish upside. Yes, Laws, I did. I closed that on Thursday. I sold those for 85 per. So made a little bit of profit, but not much, which is okay. But I'm gonna sit out those calls until the reverse split happens. Once the reverse split happens, I'll be jumping back into those September calls. Excuse me, I keep yawning today. Okay, and I am looking for this push downward to the 723.57 for QQQ to invalidate some of our bullish structure. On semis, we have a wonky right shoulder, but it is starting to pull down. Does look like it wants to push to the 591.06, which is kind of what we're looking for. We're looking for some of that downside structure. On SPY, we did not push back up to the high. So if we do see the push down on the 1 minute time frame, I would expect basically to push down all the way to the 749.10. Volatility has ticked down quite a bit. It's at 90.07. 90.06, excuse me. So this can be alluding to an upside push. I feel like QQQ and semis have just been so backwards today. Well, not QQQ and semis, but I mean tech and semis have been trading wonky compared to the SPY lately. Really think they need to rebalance everything, but that's just my personal opinion. QQQ did close that inverse cup. SPY pulled to the 750.09. Looks very likely it's going to pull to that 750, 750.17. Just based off of us being only, 15, 20 cents away. But we do have bearish structure on semiconductors and on QQQ, which make this a little challenging. So it's definitely going to close that level. Yeah, there we go. Upper Bollinger on the 5-minute time frame is at the 750.53. So when we do get to that range, that's going to pull us very close towards the larger cup at this 751.31. So we have to be cautious of that. But I'm still seeing downward structures within semiconductors and QQQ. So now that we have closed that cup, we can form a small handle. Which that handle can turn into that inverse cup to the downside. Volatility still ticking down though. It's at 89.98. So we do have the cup and a very small handle. Again, that can give us that breakout. It's at 751.31. Now I'm not closing my puts yet because we can push get into that 751, and if we do, I'll be looking to short there again, so I'll just tack on those positions. Now I am looking for a rejection out of semis at this 1 minute time frame. At the 20 watt, excuse me, which is the 594.88. Same with QQQ, it's at 724.55. Yes, it's above that right now, but we'll see if it pulls down within that range. I'm gonna go get some coffee really quick, everybody, so I'll be right back in just a few minutes. But I will go ahead and leave that note. if I can click this, click the box. Let's see, let's do 11:10. Okay, I will be right back, everybody. Just a few minutes anyway. Okay, I am back, everybody. So, unfortunately, I'm only going to be able to stream like another 20 minutes today. Um, my daughter's school called, and the person that watches her, is not going to be there today. So, I'm gonna need to watch her today, so can't actively stream and trade and everything while doing that. So, I'll go wake her up in like 30 minutes or 20 minutes. If you do have any questions, though, during this time would be really, really the best time to ask. So I won't be here until, tomorrow. Okay, so let's check what's going on while I was making coffee on the phone. So we still have our bearish structure out of semis. Okay. We do have a really nice right shoulder there. This isn't really encompassing the head. Let's redraw that. So the head's that big portion right there. We have that cup closed. From the handle to the downside. Does create that right shoulder, which is telling me that very likely we're going to try to push down pretty heavy. Even if the SPY looks bullish right now. And we see this out of QQQ as well. Inverse cup, inverse cup, inverse cup. This does create a head and shoulders. Which again is telling me that very likely we pull down on QQQ, at least at 721, 53. So for SPY, our structure of course looks entirely different, which for SPY it looks like cup, handle, starting to form a small handle from that, and heading up. But if we see semis and QQQ pull down, then this should turn into some bearish structure as well. Which kind of the same thesis. I am targeting, if I could talk right, the 748.08. That's why I currently have my stop order or the market conditional order set to the 748.09 because it's slightly above that gap. Maybe I should set it to like the 748.12, something really safe. But if we see continued selling from that range, it should take us down to that 747.41. So that's what I'm looking at for SPY. We do have a couple different really important resist ranges in here that we need to break through, or support ranges, excuse me. So we do need to break through each one of these, but that's kind of what we're contending with right now. So I'm gonna leave that up. Like even after I close the stream today, I'll leave that up for tomorrow and we'll see how that worked out. But semis here have a lot of room to sell downward. And what I'm doing here is I'm just targeting prior important support ranges. For selling to the downside, you target support. For buying to the upside, you target previous resistances, which is kind of like why we're targeting the top of this cup here um, at this 595 on semiconductors. So we also have to account for that resist right, or that support right there, even if they're still very close together. That's kind of what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the market to hit that level, buy up a little bit, hit the next level, buy up a little bit, hit the next level. I absolutely can. That's a great idea. I should just make that something that I do every single time, Lauren. So just give me 1 second. And also the max pain today. So I'm gonna start doing this. Okay. So we're gonna start, and I just want to delete some of this prior structure because we all know about it. We don't need to see it. But I'm gonna start putting up 3 markers on the day. Okay, and we'll just start this literally at the beginning of the day. So I will adjust these in just a second, but it's gonna look bloated until then. So we're going to have one line be our max pain. Max pain's important because the market really likes to close around that level. Let me make that so it's actually visible and put it in the center. Okay, so there's our max pain. Now let's check the call wall and the put wall. So 1 second. Okay, so 0 DTE. Ah, okay, perfect. So we do have a call and put wall at the 750, which is why we're gravitating quite heavily to that right now. So we're going to make this, we'll make this orange, and we'll delete this other one for now. Change this to the 750. And we will put the text right there. Okay, so I'm going to delete this arrow because we don't need that. So this is telling us that with the call and put wall being at the 750, that either we should see a very adverse move above this range, or, you know, are selling below that range. Okay, well, where's our max pain today? At that 745. Let me actually mark the level correctly. So where's our max pain today? All the way down here. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to head all the way down there, but this is sure as heck alluding to it. Okay. Um, which is very good for our puts. So that's really important, and I'll try to make sure to keep doing that each and every session. If I do forget, feel free to remind me. I don't get offended by reminders or anything else, so don't worry about that. We're seeing a lot of very quality bearish structure. However, our volatility is still pulling down. Again, it was all the way up at 91.71 this morning. It's currently at 89.93. So until the dealers are really ready to sell off, that volatility is going to be sitting low. But as we always know, volatility picks up very quickly. Let's see this session on Thursday, where we basically went from that 86 all the way to the 91.42 within a single session, and that happened fairly quickly. So when dealers are ready, the volatility will pick up pretty quickly. Now the HIG is at 79.78, so not entirely selling off yet. It's just kind of holding its weight for the current moment. But when we do get active selling occurring, I do think that's going to be picking up quite heavily. Now for semiconductors, remember, they were all the way up at that 598 today. They're currently at 589, and this is kind of what I was saying, is that the movement in semis can be very adverse. While it's very, possible we can see that move up to the 614 today, I think it's highly unlikely. I think it's a lot more likely that we see continuation within this bearish structure here, and likely end the day with forming some sort of right shoulder or something. But we need to see selling within the SPY. We need to see volatility picking up. Our ADL has been looking very strong this morning. It's actually been rising quite a lot. But we've been seeing this divergence with semis and tech, which for me it's really frustrating to see, because how do I explain this? Usually tech and semis tell you the story of what's going on with the SPY, okay? Because the SPY is largely weighted for tech and semis. Well, when we see semis selling, when we see tech selling, but yet we see we see the SPY buying, um, it's very misleading. We're seeing our volatility slowly tick upward, so it's 89.94. It was at the 89.88 or something like that. 89.86, excuse me. 1 minute time frame. Again, we do have to be cautious that this can be that cup with the handle, and that would lead to a breakout and very likely to that 751. But semis have been working on bearish structure. QQQ working on a lot of bearish structure, but not entirely within the bearish realm yet. We do need to see some of these previous supports taken out. So I am looking for those ranges to be cleared out fairly soon on QQQ. And also with QQQ, technically it can push to the upper Bollinger and still be bearish because pushing to the upper Bollinger doesn't clear the high of the day. It can, it definitely can, so don't assume that it can't. This absolutely can form some sort of cup, create a handle, and then continue to the upside. So just something we need to contend with, but currently on the 1 minute time frame, we basically are at that upper Bollinger, which means that from a mean reversion standpoint, we should be expecting a pushback down. Okay. Semis got really close to that gap, but did not complete it just yet. Kind of same thing with semis here. We can see that push to the upper Bollinger. This would still be a fairly bearish structure, and we can see that pull down from that range. SPY cleared that cup here that we talked about. And volatility is at 89.81. Micron's in a range to reject as well, potentially forming a cup and hand, or not a cup and handle, but a head and shoulders on the day. Now I know this is not the best trading rules, but these type of puts I will be holding pretty much the entirety of the day, just because of a few different conditions. Is that one, our markets are very, very heavily pushed right now. Okay, and I'm not meaning from like the daily standpoint or anything else, because from the daily standpoint, we do have plenty of room to push. Okay, we can push basically all the way to that 760. Um, Not expecting that today. I think that'd be a wild day if it did. That would push the SPY basically over 2%. I don't expect that. However, semis were all the way up almost to 6% today. Okay. Um, we definitely have a lot of room to move right now, both to the downside and upside. Now, with semiconductors, we usually see about $30 moves within the day. So currently, we're up about $24. At one point, that was very, very close to that $30, $32 range. However, and this is a big however, we have seen with semis where we were up $30 in the day, and then we pulled down $30 in the day as well. Okay, so as good as this buying looks so far, we do have a lot of mean reversion trading to be had. Okay, within the hourly time frame, we're pushed into the upper Bollinger, which means that we can be seeing downside. QQQ, very likely similar conditions, very close to that upper Bollinger, which is telling us that, we can have that mean reversion trade, which is going from the upper Bollinger back down to at least the 20-MA, potentially even the lower Bollinger. And the SPY looks like it may want to push that 751.31, but it still doesn't clear the fact that the market is very, very heavily pushed. And when the conditions are very heavily pushing like this, it does lead to the ability to sell down quite dramatically. As you can see on the hourly time frame, every time we push into this upper Bollinger, we generally have fairly large selling. This is kind of a little bit of an enigma there, but fairly large selling from the upper Bollinger. Okay. So I think that that's going to remain true. And because of that, um, even if we hit that 751.30, whatever, I'm going to take a short position, which I'll be adding on to these 747 puts. They might seem out of strike today, but I don't think so at all. The market's currently pushed up roughly $6. It'll be around $7 when we hit that level. We can absolutely pull down very heavily. And again, we could still be very bullish from pulling down heavily as well. So, something to think about. Now, I was supposed to be gone about a minute ago, but is there any final questions on the day before I hop out for the day? Let me see. On my chart, I had to set calls. You see, one thing that I would do, Jin, is that on these days where you can't trade, just open a very small paper trade account and you can do it like literally within 10 seconds. Um, make that very small paper trade account, make it so it's only has $500 in it. Okay. And treat those trades as real as possible. Okay, so if you're seeing these levels, if you're seeing these entries and exits, um, try to really trade positions around it and see how it works out. And I don't know if you got to the part of the class with the trading journal yet, but even with your paper trades, I'd be sitting and journaling those trades. Treat them like real trades. Um, may not be real money, but you can still benefit from learning a ton from them. So don't take these days where you don't have money to not trade, um, especially if this is something you're wanting to really commit to and do for a long period of time. Um, I was paper trading for like 2 years before I really jumped into real trading. And even at that point, even when I had the confidence of paper trading, um, real trading was still very hard to adjust to. It took me many, many years to feel comfortable with trading real funds. Um, so I highly suggest it. I don't think it's a crutch or anything else. I think it's a great learning tool, and you should definitely give it a shot. Yes, I heavily suggest a paper trade or a paper journal. Um, like I literally have notebooks. I mean, I have notebooks all over my desk where I'm writing notes about symbols I'm going over, what data sets I'm seeing, what I'm seeing within my trades, what trades I'm taking. It's super important to just be able to have that ability to very quickly jot something down. Um, so even if you print out that sheet that I posted in the journaling section, which I can make like a printer version or a printer friendly version if needed. Um, However, I heavily suggest going through the journal, treating these trades like as real as possible, trying to take as small of losses as possible, not trying to full in jump into a position. Because that's what I see with a lot of paper traders. They'll start their accounts with like $10,000 and then they'll capitalize on a single good trade and be like, okay, I'm ready to trade. And it's like, no, you're not. You still have a lot of room to grow. Um, so my suggestion is take it as real as possible. Okay, make each and every trade count. Um, my big lesson for me was that I was able to take a paper trade account from 5,000 to over $1 million, and it didn't take a lot of um, I don't want to call them this, but kind of like YOLO trades, where you just kind of all into a position. It took me about 4 months to fully do that, and it was a very great learning experience. I had some days where I got absolutely smoked. I had days that I did very, very well. But I wrote each and every trade down. I took each and every trade very seriously. And it was a very, very important learning lesson for the start of my trading career. So after I got to that point, then that's when I really started engaging on real funds. And ever since, it's been very, very, lucrative. Yeah, just send it to me and in a direct message on Discord. I'll be happy to go over it. But yeah, if you start a paper trade account with 500 and basically have the assumption that I cannot put any more money into that, that's what I got to trade with. I think it's going to teach you a lot of really quality lessons. Now, before I close out the stream, um, I just kind of want to make a note that if we push to the 751.31, I will be tacking on quite a bit of the 747 puts. They're going to be super cheap at that point, and I still see the downside today, as unlikely as it might seem. I still see the downside. So if we hit that level, I'm going to be adding, quite a many of the 747 puts. I'm not going to overextend my positions, meaning that overall I want to try to keep that risk about $250 within the 0DTE positions for this, you know, small of a portfolio. Excuse me. But I will be tacking on more of those positions. Because kind of like this cup here that we saw, I do expect a pull down to form that handle. So if we do just run up all the way to that 751.31, then again I still expect that pull down to form the handle before we start pushing to the 754.73, which again is that next resistance. Okay, we always target resistances in levels. So this resistance we were initially targeting was the 750.18. We then started to target the 751. From that 751, there's this top range at the 754.73. It's also a range at the 753.50, but we're not worried about that right at this moment. So, okay, everybody. Um, I hope everyone has a great trading day. Trade safe, don't overcommit. These 747 puts were super, super cheap. So even though I might be down $60 on them, I really don't care too much. They were like $30 each. Probably $10 each at this point. Let's see. Yeah, about $10 each. So when I do go to reload my positions up there, again, I'm gonna be able to take like probably like 12 different positions um for that downside. So I will be targeting the downside later today, but I do want to see some conditions change. Volatility is very low. It's basically at the low of the day, 89.50. It did hit 89.45. And I want to see the Higgs selling. Okay, so it's currently at 79.80. And remember, there was a 36-cent dividend last week, so that actually means that we're currently at about 80.16, um, which would be a very elevated level for the Hig. Okay, that's a very bullish level for the Hig. Um, One thing I do want to end today with is that I am selling my Hig W positions, if I can type it right. This is a a high dividend stock. Seemed like it last couple dividends weren't so great, but it pays a monthly dividend. Okay. Um, I'm going to be selling these because I am starting to see our tech upside taper, and I'm going to be getting into treasury-based dividends, which have been getting absolutely pounded. Um, the dividends have not been so great, but for the share price and everything, and because I'm expecting the treasury market to start seeing buying, it's definitely something I want to be in. Okay, so very likely either today or waiting for the next lower Bollinger push, I will be entering quite heavily into TLTW. Okay, and again, that's a monthly dividend. Basically, you buy those and forget. Okay, any final questions for today, everybody, before we end the stream? I know there wasn't really a lot of great trades to be set up today. We were chopping quite heavily, and we did have mixed signals to take these calls earlier on. We did talk about it, but we had semiconductors pushing up um, towards the upper Bollinger at that point, which was telling us that they can start pulling down. Kind of the same with QQQ. And whereas on the SPY, you know, when we were pushing the upper Bollinger, QQQ and semis were pushing the lower Bollinger. When we went to the lower Bollinger on SPY, QQQ and semis were pushing the upper Bollinger. So quite a divergence, and it's something I actually need to look into because there's something putting a lot of weight into the SPY that semis and tech are not accounting for. I don't know if that's SpaceX, I don't know, I have no clue. Um, so I aim to find what that is today. Because something is pushing these levels very, very heavily on SPY when we're seeing our two heavyweights pulling down. That's not standard, so we do need to get that figured out over the next couple trading sessions. So with that said, I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Trade safe. Don't overcommit to the puts, even though I'm, more than willing to engage on them once we push that level. Uh, but that's just a personal preference. When the market is very, very heavily extended, that's when I like to short. I know some people might say chase the bullish momentum, um, but really that's a big way to get positions absolutely wrecked. But same can be said with trying to short the tops of these. Okay, so what I'm trying to short, just to make this very clear, is that I'm really trying to support or short prior support ranges. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. And by we, I mean me. I'm gonna short those support ranges or those resistance ranges, excuse me, and see if we can catch a nice bid to the downside. So yeah, I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and I will see you in tomorrow's stream. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and I hope you have a great day.